These verses provide specific guidance to every Muslim state. Wealth and assets which are not in the ownership of an individual or cannot be in his ownership should remain in the ownership of the state, so that besides fulfilling some other needs of the state through them, they are directed to those sectors of the society which are dependent on others for their needs. As far as the way in which this public wealth and property are to be organized is concerned, the Shari'ah has left this matter to the circumstances which prevail in a society and upon the general well-being of Muslims. Therefore, the rulers of an Islamic state, in consultation with the elected representatives, can adopt whatever measures they deem appropriate in this regard. Consequently, it is known that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in his times gave the lands of Khaybar for crop sharing, left certain lands under the permanent control of certain people for whom these lands had been reserved, regarded certain lands as hima, left certain things to be shared equally by everyone, fixed the principle of al-akrab fal-akrab, or the nearest to the next nearest, for using the water of certain springs and canals, or the way the Caliph Umar anhu imposed a fixed amount of tribute or kharaj on the state-owned lands of Syria and Iraq conquered in his times, according to the extent of their produce, while leaving them in the hands of their previous owners. 3. Usurpation of wealth. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل إلا أن تكون تجارة عن تراض منكم. Believers, do not devour one another's wealth by wrongful means except through trading by mutual consent. Surah number 4, verse 29. This verse prohibits a person from devouring other people's wealth through means which are against justice, honesty, fairness, and against the good conventions of a society. It is this directive of the Quran which forms the basis of all prohibitions in Islam that pertain to economic matters. Obtaining money through illegal gratification, theft, extortion, lying, cooperation with evil, embezzlement, misappropriation, consuming unclaimed items without publicizing them, all come under it. These evils require no further discussion, since they are universally acknowledged sins in every society and in every religion. Transactions and activities which become a source of deceit or damage for the parties involved are also corollaries of this directive. The various forms which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ forbade in his own times are selling something before its possession is taken, selling grain brought in mounds before bringing it to the place where it is sold, selling and purchasing done by a city dweller for a villager, increasing one's bid in an auction just for deception, bargaining when someone else is bargaining, muhaqala, or selling crop when it is still in the spikes, muzabana, selling the dates which are on a date tree in exchange for plucked dates, mu'awama, selling the fruits of trees for many years, thuniya, or leaving an unspecified exception in a bargain. One of its forms, for example, was that the seller would say, I sell my grain to you, but I will take something out of it. Mulamasa, a deal in which a person without thinking just touches the other person's cloth, and a deal is made in this manner. Munabadha, a deal in which people throw something towards one another, and in this way a bargain is made. Bay' ila hablil habala, or a deal in which people sell camels by saying, whatever offspring this camel gives birth to, and when that offspring gets pregnant, whatever it gives birth to, then the last offspring is bought by me. Bay'ul hisa. In pre-Islamic times, such a bargain existed generally in two forms. A. People would make a deal about a piece of land, and then the buyer would throw a pebble. The distance covered by the pebble would be regarded as the length of the land sold. B. People would throw a pebble and say that whatever thing it touched would be considered as sold. Selling fruits of a tree before their quality and characteristics become evident. selling spikes before they turn white and become safe from calamities, selling a commodity which is defective except when the buyer is informed of its defects, holding the milk of camels and goats in their udders before selling it, intercepting tradesmen and buying their merchandise before they reach the markets, making a deal by giving money in advance such that a person obtains the item before it is ready, except if this transaction is carried out for a fixed measure, a specified weight, and a definite period of time. Mukhabara, or adopting methods of crop sharing in which the profit of the landlord is fixed beforehand. Adopting methods of crop sharing in which the production of a particular area of land is regarded as the right of the landlord. Selling jointly owned properties without giving the shareholders a chance to buy them, except if the ownership divisions are determined and the parts are separated. These are the various forms of sale and purchase and crop sharing which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ prohibited in his times. Since all the above mentioned directives are based on the underlying bases of deceit and damage, the directive of prohibition will stand dissolved in circumstances in which these bases no longer exist, just as if, as a result of evolution and development of civilizations, these bases emerge in some new economic activity, then that activity will also stand prohibited. Gambling and interest also belong to this category of devouring wealth through wrongful means. This writer will now venture forth to elaborate the view of the Quran in detail on these two hideous crimes. Gambling. Gambling, everyone knows, is merely chancing one's luck. The Quran has called it from among the filthy works of Satan. Obviously, this expression has been employed because gambling gives rise to moral misconduct in a person which gradually encompasses his personality. The reason is that if an economic activity is based on rights and services and rational decisions, it develops a high moral character, and if an economic activity is based on mere chance, fortune, and fortuity, it becomes an attitude which is based on avoidance of hard work and service. This gives rise to such mean qualities as cowardice and faint-heartedness, which subsequently eliminate the innate qualities of honor, integrity, sincerity, and self-respect. As a result, a person becomes unmindful to the remembrance of the Almighty and to the prayer, and instead of having love and affection for his fellow beings, he has nothing but enmity and hatred for them. The Quran says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إنما الخمر والميسر والأنساب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه لعلكم تفلحون إنما يريد الشيطان أن يوقع بينكم العداوة والبغضاء في الخمر والميسر ويصدكم عن ذكر الله وعن الصلاة فهل أنتم منتهون. Believers, this liquor and gambling and idols and these divining arrows are abominations devised by Satan. Avoid them that you may succeed. Satan seeks to stir up enmity and hatred among you by means of liquor and gambling, and to keep you from the remembrance of God and from the prayer. Will you then not abstain from them? Surah number 5, verses 90 to 91. An important point to note is that gambling in pre-Islamic times was also a means through which the rich showed their generosity and helped the poor and needy. In winters, when cold winds blew in and caused conditions akin to drought, the courageous would gather at various places, drink liquor, and in their state of inebriation would slaughter any camels they could get hold of. They would pay the owner of the camels whatever price he demanded. They would then gamble on the meat of the slaughtered camels. Whatever parts of meat a person won in this gambling, he would generously distribute them among the poor who would gather round them on such occasions. In pre-Islamic Arabia, this was a matter of great honor, and people who took part in this activity were considered very philanthropic and generous. The poets would narrate the accounts of their benevolence in their odes. On the other hand, people who stayed away from this activity would be called barm or stingy. It was this very utility of liquor and gambling which prompted people to inquire when they were regarded as prohibited items. The Quran asserted in its reply that in spite of possessing this benefit, they were instrumental in producing moral misconduct in an individual, which in no case can be allowed. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. They ask you about liquor and gambling. Tell them, there is great sin in them, and some profit is well for people, but their sin is greater than their profit. Surah number 2, verse 219.